The story of America is a story of courage, of resilience, and above all, of liberty. Our journey begins in a time of great change, in a land brimming with both promise and peril. The American colonies, young and vibrant, were coming of age. They were a patchwork of peoples, united by a shared spirit of independence and a deep-seated belief in self-determination. With each passing year, their ties to the motherland, Great Britain, felt increasingly strained, like a coat that no longer fit. The colonists yearned for the freedom to govern themselves, to shape their own destiny. This fundamental disconnect, this clash between a yearning for liberty and a thirst for control, would set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the course of history. The relationship between Great Britain and her American colonies, once cordial and mutually beneficial, began to sour in the mid-18th century. The British, burdened by the costs of waging wars abroad, increasingly viewed the colonies as a source of revenue to replenish their depleted coffers. This led to a series of acts passed by the British Parliament that imposed taxes and restrictions on the colonists. The colonists, incensed by these measures, which they deemed unjust and tyrannical, responded with a resounding cry, "No taxation without representation!" The British government, blinded by its perceived right to levy taxes on its colonies, failed to grasp the profound impact of its actions. The Stamp Act, however, proved to be the breaking point. The requirement to pay a tax on every piece of printed paper, from newspapers to legal documents, struck at the heart of colonial commerce and communication. The Sons of Liberty, a clandestine group committed to resisting British rule, organized protests and demonstrations. In October 1765, representatives from 9 colonies gathered in New York City for what became known as the Stamp Act Congress. The delegates, united in their opposition to the Stamp Act, drafted a Declaration of Rights and Grievances, asserting their right to self-governance and condemning the tax as unjust and oppressive. The Stamp Act Congress, though it failed to secure the repeal of the hated tax, achieved something far more significant. It fostered a sense of unity and shared purpose among the colonies. The British government, facing mounting pressure from colonial boycotts and protests, eventually repealed the Stamp Act in 1766. However, the victory was short-lived. Parliament passed the Declaratory Act, asserting its right to make laws governing the colonies in all cases whatsoever. The Townshend Acts of 1767, which imposed new taxes on goods like tea, lead, glass, paint, and paper, reignited the flames of colonial resistance. The streets of Boston, a city known for its independent spirit and unwavering pursuit of liberty, became a tinderbox of tension. On a cold March evening in 1770, that simmering tension boiled over. A detachment of British soldiers, harassed by a crowd of angry colonists, fired into the unarmed mob. The Boston Massacre, as it quickly became known, sent shockwaves through the colonies and across the Atlantic. The image of innocent blood spilled on American soil became a rallying cry for resistance. The British government, seemingly oblivious to the growing storm brewing in the colonies, continued to pursue policies that further alienated the colonists. The Tea Act of 1773, which granted the British East India Company a monopoly on tea sales in the colonies, proved to be a fateful miscalculation. On a crisp December night in 1773, a group of colonists, disguised as Native Americans, boarded 3 British ships docked in Boston Harbor. With determination and a sense of righteous indignation, they hurled 342 chests of British East India Company tea into the icy waters. The Boston Tea Party, a daring act of defiance, became a defining moment in the American Revolution. The British government, outraged by the Boston Tea Party, responded with swift and uncompromising force. The Coercive Acts, known in the colonies as the Intolerable Acts, were a series of punitive measures designed to punish Massachusetts for its defiance and to quell the growing spirit of rebellion. The Intolerable Acts, far from crushing the spirit of resistance, had the opposite effect. They united the colonies in a shared sense of outrage and solidified their resolve to resist British tyranny. The intolerable acts, meant to isolate and punish Massachusetts, instead became a crucible, forging a stronger sense of unity amongst the colonies. In September 1774, delegates from 12 colonies, their hearts heavy with apprehension but spirits ablaze with determination, assembled in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. Inside Carpenter's Hall, men of great intellect and unwavering conviction debated the course of action. They drafted a declaration of rights and grievances, eloquently outlining their grievances against British policies and asserting their right to self-governance. The British government, viewing the Continental Congress as a seditious gathering, doubled down on its hardline stance. General Thomas Gage, the British military governor of Massachusetts, received orders to seize colonial military supplies stockpiled in Concord, a small town about 20 miles west of Boston. Paul Revere, a silversmith and ardent patriot, rode through the countryside, his now famous cry, "The British are coming," echoing through the night, rousing the colonial militia. At Lexington Green, a small band of colonial militiamen, vastly outnumbered, faced off against the disciplined ranks of British regulars. A shot rang out, its origin lost to history, and the first battle of the American Revolution had begun. The battles of Lexington and Concord, though militarily insignificant, had profound consequences. They shattered any remaining illusions of peaceful reconciliation and ignited a full-scale rebellion. The Second Continental Congress, convening in Philadelphia in May 1775, faced the daunting task of organizing and supplying an army, securing foreign alliances, and navigating the perilous path towards nationhood. Despite early setbacks and the overwhelming might of the British military, the Continental Army, fueled by a fervent belief in their cause, fought valiantly. In June 1776, a committee of 5, including Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin, was tasked with drafting a Declaration of Independence. A baptism by fire, Bunker Hill, and the price of freedom. The early days of the Revolution were a baptism by fire for the fledgling Continental Army. Composed largely of farmers, shopkeepers, and tradesmen, they lacked the discipline and training of the British regulars. Yet, they were driven by an unyielding belief in their cause, a willingness to fight and die for the ideals enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. In June 1775, just weeks after Lexington and Concord, colonial forces, under the command of William Prescott, fortified Breed's Hill, overlooking Boston Harbor. The British, determined to dislodge the rebels, launched a frontal assault against the entrenched colonists. Wave after wave of British regulars charged up the hill, only to be met by a withering hail of musket fire. The Redcoats, their ranks decimated, faltered and retreated, only to regroup and attack again. 3 times the British charged, and 3 times they were repulsed. Finally, their ammunition exhausted, the colonists were forced to withdraw. The Battle of Bunker Hill, though technically a British victory, proved to be a Pyrrhic one. The heavy British casualties, over 1,000 men killed or wounded, shocked the British High Command and demonstrated the tenacity and fighting spirit of the Continental Army. A turning point, the Battle of Saratoga and the hope of alliance. The early years of the war saw setbacks and victories for both sides. The Continental Army struggled with shortages but excelled at guerrilla warfare. In the summer of 1777, British General John Burgoyne aimed to divide the colonies by driving south from Canada. His supply lines stretched thin, facing stiff resistance at Saratoga. Burgoyne's army met Continental troops under Horatio Gates. Outnumbered, Burgoyne surrendered his entire army. The victory convinced France to formally enter the war on the American side. The winter of our discontent Valley Forge and the test of endurance. The winter of 1777 to 1778 proved to be a crucible for the Continental Army. Following their victory at Saratoga, General Washington's troops, ill-equipped and short on supplies, established winter quarters at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. The conditions at Valley Forge were nothing short of deplorable. The soldiers, their uniforms ragged and worn, endured freezing temperatures, inadequate shelter, and chronic shortages of food, medicine, and blankets. Disease swept through the camp, claiming the lives of hundreds. Yet, despite the unimaginable hardships, the spirit of the Continental Army remained unbroken. George Washington, General Washington, his leadership tested as never before, shared the suffering of his men. He wrote countless letters to the Continental Congress, pleading for supplies and reinforcements. He rallied his officers, inspiring them with his unwavering belief in their cause, and through it all the soldiers endured. They drilled, they trained, and they prepared for the spring campaign. Valley Forge, a place of immense suffering, became a symbol of American resilience, a testament to the unwavering spirit that would ultimately secure victory in the fight for independence. A world awakened, France, and the global stage of revolution. The American Revolution had reverberations heard around the world. The ideals in the Declaration of Independence resonated far beyond North America. France, eager to weaken Great Britain, covertly supplied the Americans with arms and funds. The victory at Saratoga was the tipping point. It convinced King Louis XVI that the Americans could win their independence. In February 1778, France recognized the United States and signed a treaty of alliance. The arrival of French troops was a major turning point in the war. The American Revolution became a global conflict with France, Spain, and the Netherlands joining against Great Britain. The Southern Gambit, a change of scenery, a test of resolve. The British, recognizing that their strategy of focusing on the northern colonies had failed, shifted their attention southward. They believed that they could exploit loyalist sentiment in the South and rally support for the crown among the large population of slaves by promising them freedom. The Southern campaign, however, proved to be a brutal and costly affair for both sides. The war in the South was characterized by fierce battles, partisan raids, and a bitter struggle for control of the hearts and minds of the civilian population. General Nathanael Greene, a brilliant strategist and Washington's most trusted commander, waged a masterful campaign of attrition against the British in the Carolinas. He avoided large-scale engagements, instead choosing to harass the enemy, disrupt their supply lines, and wear down their resolve. The Southern campaign saw some of the most brutal fighting of the entire war. Battles like Camden, Guilford Courthouse, and Cowpens were fiercely contested, resulting in heavy casualties on both sides. The war in the South was a brutal struggle, testing the resolve and resilience of both armies. Victories: dawn, Yorktown surrender, and the birth of a nation. As the war entered its 8th year, the British, weary of the protracted and costly conflict, sought a decisive victory that would break the American spirit. General Charles Cornwallis, the British commander in the South, established a fortified position at Yorktown, Virginia, hoping to establish a naval base and crush the remaining American forces. Unbeknownst to Cornwallis, General Washington, in a brilliant strategic maneuver, marched his army south from New York, while a French fleet under the command of Admiral de Grasse blockaded the Chesapeake Bay, trapping Cornwallis and his army at Yorktown. The Siege of Yorktown, which began in late September 1781, was a masterpiece of military coordination and cooperation. American and French artillery bombarded the British fortifications, while infantry advanced under the cover of earthworks. Cornwallis, realizing the futility of his position, surrendered his army on October 19, 1781. The surrender at Yorktown effectively ended the major fighting of the American Revolution. News of the victory sparked celebrations throughout the colonies and sent shockwaves across the Atlantic. Great Britain, its military and treasury depleted, was finally forced to acknowledge the reality of American independence.
The victory at Yorktown sent shockwaves across the Atlantic, reverberating through the halls of power in London. The seemingly invincible British Empire had been humbled, its grip on the American colonies shattered.
In Paris, representatives from the United States met with their British counterparts.
On September 3, 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, formally ending the American Revolution. The 13 colonies had emerged as a beacon of liberty, a shining example for the world. A legacy of liberty, the enduring spirit of 1776. The American Revolution was more than just a war for independence. It was a crucible that forged a new nation. The Founding Fathers left an enduring legacy that continues to inspire and shape the world. The spirit of '76 resonated far beyond North America. It ignited revolutions across the globe. The American experiment was far from perfect. The Founding Fathers grappled with the issue of slavery. Yet, they embedded within the Constitution the tools for change. Today, the legacy of the American Revolution continues to inspire. The principles of liberty and self-governance remain as relevant as ever. It is a legacy that belongs to all who yearn for freedom. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe as it greatly supports the channel. Thank you for watching.